As cinematographers, we're often made to think that having more gear is going to solve our problems. Because if you have everything available, can't you get exactly what you want? A full lens package means that we can capture each and every frame exactly as you envision it. A full lighting package means that you've got options to be able to tweak each and every detail to get the perfect lighting situation. When you have a gimbal or a drone, it means you can capture the action from any and every vantage point. But what happens when you strip all of that away on purpose? In this video, we're going to take a look at how to embrace limitations, or even create them for yourself, to ultimately be more efficient and more creative. So why are we afraid of limitations? Ultimately, I think it comes down to one word, and that's compromise. Because if we don't have every option laid out in front of us, then it means we're having to do something that might lessen the end product. And sometimes that's true, right? Sometimes you're going to just need that certain piece of equipment to convey what it is that you need to do to tell the story. But oftentimes you don't. And I think what's important in this video is let's start to reframe what that means. Compromise in some ways can be a bad thing. But what if we start looking at it as an opportunity? The more gear you have on a project means ultimately you're going to spend more time focusing on the equipment than you are on the story. And if you're lucky enough to have a budget and a crew size that's big enough to be able to manage all of that for you, then you're probably going to be fine. But in documentaries especially, you oftentimes and most times don't have those options available to you. And so this is where you can start to use limitations to your advantage. All right, so what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the first thing that's pretty obvious is the less gear that you have means you're spending less time fumbling with equipment, whether that's running into a different room to find a piece of kit or dealing with a temperamental gimbal. The more time that you have to focus on the story means the more content you're getting and the more productive the day is. If you have a really limited camera package, it means you can pretty much carry everything that you have on you. You can just grab it out of a pouch, pull it out of a backpack, and you're ready to go. So there's no downtime and you don't stop what's happening. When it comes to lenses, try picking 2 or 3 lenses that are going to be able to cover you to get what you need. So this probably means using zooms over primes. And for a lot of the projects that I do, this makes perfect sense. And certainly primes have their place, and I use them all the time. But what a zoom offers you is a full lens package in one. And taking that one step further, there's been many projects where I've chosen to use smaller and cheaper DSLR lenses over a cinematic zoom because it's lighter, it's smaller, and I can probably carry more zooms with me on my pouch than having to carry a few heavy lenses that are going to make it harder to be able to be nimble and flexible, especially if you're having to carry all the gear with you. There's been many times on projects when in the back of my mind I've thought, well, what if I just switch lenses? Well, if I do that, it means that I'm stopping the flow of the room. I'm having to cut the camera and I'm having to change that lens. So instead of making that swap, I just stick with what I have and work with what I have in front of me. When you walk into a scene, think about, am I going to be close to the action or far from the action? That'll certainly help determine which lens you want to put on your camera. But if things change and you need to be closer, just physically moving in instead of swapping out a lens is actually going to engage the audience more with what's happening. The other thing that it's going to do is if you're only working with one lens and you really want to try to find a different perspective, then instead of swapping out, which is in some ways a lazy way to do it, is it's going to force you to be more creative to find a different angle, to be able to get a different perspective that's going to really translate in the way that you're telling that story. When you have less lighting, it means that you obviously have more time to focus on capturing the content as opposed to spending hours setting up your interview look. But what it also means is your subjects who oftentimes have never been in front of a camera before can start to clam up if they start to feel all of this equipment surrounding them, because it makes them more aware of the fact that they're being recorded. But if you can find an interesting way to just place someone next to a window and just sit and have a conversation, then the intimacy that you're going to get out of that conversation is going to be far greater than just setting up a beautiful image and not getting as good a content. So while our go-to thought might be that more gear means more options, it can also create more problems than it solves. I think it's really important to find the beauty in the constraints, allowing us to think more creatively and focus on what's in front of us. Having limited equipment options opens up more time for you to focus on what's important, and that's the story. Certainly it means you also have to think harder and you have to think more about what you can get with what you have. But ultimately, this does translate to a better product. So instead of bringing something into the equation that's just gonna make my life harder and keep me from being able to get what it is that I need to do, then I'm just gonna leave those things out and focus on the one piece of kit that's gonna be able to perform straight through the day. In an upcoming video, I'm gonna be doing a case study on a series called The Trade that I shot for Showtime. And this is gonna be a perfect example of how limitations ultimately made the show what it is. So at the end of the day, stop relying on equipment to be a crutch for you and start embracing what those limitations can offer. Over time, you're gonna start to find that you don't miss all that stuff that you've left behind because you've ultimately just got more time to think about what's important and not have to think about all of that equipment. Ultimately, our job as cinematographers is not just to create a pretty picture. It's to translate a story that conveys an emotion to your audience. And so the more time that you can give yourself to be able to think about that, to think both creatively and emotionally, then the better the product's gonna be. And so in all of my experiences, I have very much found that less is more. I hope these tips were helpful in seeing the beauty in the limitations as opposed to dreading them. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.